The Greenscape project created an unavoidable connection between Amelia and Victor. Professional ethics demanded she continue as lead architect, despite her personal misgivings. Weekly virtual meetings became a strange new reality, with Victor's gaze often lingering on her as she presented design revisions. 3 months into the project, Amelia's phone rang late one evening as she sketched at her dining table. "There's a problem with the Eastern Foundation plans," Victor said without preamble. "I'm flying out tomorrow to discuss it with the engineering team." "I'd like you to join us." "I can send my associate, Amelia," he interrupted. "Please." The plea in his voice gave her pause. "I can't leave the girls on short notice." A moment of silence. "Bring them." The following afternoon, Amelia found herself in Victor's private jet with Lily and Luna buckled into plush seats, wide-eyed at the luxury. She had told them only that they were meeting an important client, nothing about who Victor really was. When Victor boarded, his confident stride faltered at the sight of the twins. Amelia recognized the emotion that crossed his face, the same overwhelming love she'd felt the first time she'd held them. "Hello," he said softly, crouching to their level. "I'm Victor." Lily, always the bolder one, extended her hand formally. "I'm Lily Chenreed. That's Luna. We're identical but not the same." Victor shook her small hand, visibly fighting emotion. "It's an honor to meet you both." Throughout the flight, Victor answered the girls' endless questions about the plane, carefully keeping his distance from Amelia, who watched with a complex mixture of emotions. The engineering meeting was brief, the foundation issue less urgent than presented. As they prepared to return to Port Haven, Victor approached Amelia while the twins explored the hotel garden under Eleanor's watchful eye. "There was no emergency," Amelia stated. "No," Victor admitted. "I needed to see them." "To see you? Why now, Victor?" "It's been 5 years." He looked out at the garden where their daughters played. "Because I built an empire and discovered it meant nothing. Because every achievement felt hollow. Because I made the worst mistake of my life when I let you walk away." "You didn't let me walk away," Amelia corrected. "You gave me an ultimatum that made staying impossible." "I was wrong," Victor said simply, terrified of losing control, of vulnerability. "I've spent 5 years surrounded by people who want something from me, living in perfect, empty spaces." Amelia studied the man before her, still recognizable as the Victor she'd loved, but humbled, the sharp edges softened by regret. "What do you want from me?" she asked directly. "Nothing you don't want to give," he answered. "A chance to know my daughters. Perhaps someday a chance to show you I've changed." "They're not bargaining chips, Victor. They're people with feelings that can be hurt." "I know," he said quietly. "I'd like to earn a place in their lives, however small, on your terms." In the months that followed, Victor visited Port Haven regularly. He sat through tea parties with the twins, learned their favorite stories, and never once mentioned his wealth or status. He purchased a modest house nearby, commuting to Manhattan when necessary. One evening, as the twins slept after a day at the beach with Victor, Amelia found him on her porch, watching the sunset. "They asked if you're coming to their school play," she said, sitting beside him. "I wouldn't miss it," he replied. "If that's all right with you." Amelia nodded, then asked the question that had lingered for months. "Are you doing this out of guilt?" "I started with guilt," Victor admitted. "Now it's because they're extraordinary. Because they make me want to be better. Because they're part of you." His hand rested on the porch railing inches from hers. Slowly, deliberately, Amelia placed her hand over his. "We're not who we were 5 years ago," she said softly. "I don't know if there's a way forward for us." "Neither do I," Victor replied. "But I'd like to find out, one day at a time." As the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat in comfortable silence. No promises, no grand declarations, just the tentative foundation of something new being laid, brick by careful brick, stronger perhaps than what had come before. In the house behind them, their daughters slept peacefully, unaware of the long journey that had brought their parents to this moment of quiet possibility, where past mistakes and present courage created space for a future yet to be designed. Victor Reeves stood at the podium, cameras flashing as he announced Nexus Technologies' latest breakthrough. The Lumina merger had been just the beginning. 5 years later, his quantum computing empire had transformed global markets. earning him the cover of Time magazine and a net worth that placed him firmly among the world's top 10 wealthiest individuals. "Mr. Reeves, any comment on the rumors of a government contract?" a reporter called out. Victor flashed his practiced smile. "Nexus doesn't comment on speculation, but I can say our quantum encryption technology remains unmatched." The press conference ended, and Victor retreated to his private elevator, the mask of confidence slipping as the doors closed. His executive assistant, James, handed him a tablet with the day's schedule. "The Princeton commencement speech needs final approval," James noted. "And your mother called again about Thanksgiving." Victor nodded absently, his attention caught by a digital architecture magazine on James's desk. The cover featured a striking coastal community center built from sustainable materials. "This design," Victor said, picking up the magazine. "Who's the architect?" "Terra Designs," James replied. "They're making waves in sustainable architecture. Small firm, but prestigious. The founder's been nominated for the Pritzker Prize." Something in the building's elegant lines stirred Victor's memory. He tucked the magazine into his briefcase without further comment. That evening, alone in his expanded penthouse, now occupying the top 3 floors of the building he owned, Victor poured himself a scotch and walked the silent rooms. Minimalist furnishings, priceless art, and not a single item out of place. Perfect, polished, and utterly lifeless. He loosened his tie, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest that no cardiologist had been able to diagnose. Stress, they all concluded. The cost of success, Victor knew better. It was the hollow space where something should have been. In his home office, he opened the architecture magazine, studying the community center's design. The building seemed to rise from the earth itself, harmonizing with its surroundings rather than dominating them. He flipped to the article and froze. The founder's photograph captured a woman with familiar dark eyes and a confident smile. Amelia Chen, now Amelia Chen Reed. The scotch glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. 5 years. Not once had he allowed himself to search for her, convinced that his decision had been necessary, rational. The merger had succeeded beyond all projections. His vision had been realized. He had been right, so why did victory taste like ash? Victor opened his laptop, searching for more information about Terra Designs. Their portfolio was impressive. Schools, community centers, residential projects, all bearing Amelia's distinctive approach to space and sustainability. A photo from a ribbon-cutting ceremony showed Amelia smiling, surrounded by community members. At her side stood 2 young girls, perhaps 4 years old, identical in their features. Victor's heart stuttered. The timing, the familiar shape of their eyes, the stubborn set of their jaws, like looking at his own childhood photographs. The revelation struck with physical force. He had daughters, twins, children he had rejected before they were born. For a man who prided himself on calculating every variable, he had never factored in the true cost of what he'd demanded of Amelia. The empire he'd built suddenly seemed meaningless against the weight of what he'd lost. That night, Victor didn't sleep. Instead, he stood at his window, looking out at the city that had once represented everything he wanted. Now it felt like a glittering prison of his own design. For the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself to whisper her name, Amelia. The Greenscape Initiative was the most ambitious sustainable development project in the country, a complete urban renewal focused on environmental harmony. When Terra Designs was announced as the winning architectural firm, Amelia felt a surge of professional pride. This was the legitimacy her small but growing company had earned through years of principled work. "Mommy, can we come to the big meeting?" Luna asked, her small hands arranging colored pencils on Amelia's drafting table. "Not this time, sweetheart," Amelia replied, kissing the top of her daughter's head. At 5 years old, the twins were curious, intelligent, and the center of her world. Lily looked up from her picture. "Is it because it's in New York?" Amelia paused. She'd avoided Manhattan these past 5 years, building her reputation on the opposite coast, but this project was too significant to delegate. "Yes," she answered carefully. "Mommy has to go to New York for a few days, but Eleanor will stay with you and I'll call every night." What she didn't say was how the thought of returning to the city sent anxiety coursing through her veins. Not because she feared running into Victor. Manhattan was vast, and their worlds no longer intersected, but because the city held the ghost of who she'd been before. Younger, more naive, willing to diminish herself for love. The following week, Amelia stood in the reception area of Greenscape's headquarters, reviewing her presentation. The project's primary investor remained anonymous, common enough in large-scale developments, but the executive board would all be present. Ms. Chen Reed? The receptionist called. They're ready for you. Amelia smoothed her tailored blazer and entered the boardroom with confident strides. She was halfway through setting up her presentation when the boardroom door opened again. "Apologies for my lateness," came a voice that stopped Amelia's heart mid-beat. Victor Reeves stood in the doorway, as impeccably dressed as she remembered, though with subtle changes, threads of silver at his temples, fine lines around his eyes. His gaze locked with hers, surprise giving way to stunned recognition. "Ms. Chen Reed," the chairman began, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "This is Victor Reeves, our primary investor." Victor recovered first. "We've met," he said, his voice controlled. "Some years ago." Somehow Amelia found her professional voice. "Mr. Reeves, an unexpected reunion." The presentation proceeded with Amelia operating on autopilot, her polished expertise carrying her through while her mind raced. Had he known? Was this deliberate? But the genuine shock in his eyes suggested otherwise, a coincidence as profound as it was unwelcome. When the board members filed out for a scheduled break, Amelia gathered her materials intending to escape. Amelia. Victor's voice was quiet behind her. She turned, meeting his gaze with a composure that had taken years to build. "This is purely professional, Victor. Let's keep it that way." "I saw a photograph," he said, the words rushed, "in an article about Terra Designs. You were at a ribbon cutting. There were 2 girls with you." Amelia's protective instincts flared. "My daughters are not a topic for discussion." "Our daughters," Victor corrected, his voice breaking slightly. "You made your choice." Amelia's tone was ice. "You chose your merger over your children before they were born. I didn't know they were twins. Would that have changed anything?" The silence between them held 5 years of unspoken words. "I'd like to meet them," Victor finally said. Amelia gathered her portfolio. "You've lived without them for 5 years. I'm sure you can continue." As she walked out, Victor called after her. "I was wrong, Amelia. About everything." She paused at the door without turning. "Yes, you were." The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victor Reeves's penthouse. Amelia Chen traced the condensation on her champagne flute, watching the city lights blur through the glass. Another celebration, another milestone for Nexus Technologies. At 32, Victor had already revolutionized the tech industry with his quantum computing innovations. "What's on your mind, architect?" Victor's voice was warm honey as he approached from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist. His custom Italian suit still carried the scent of his sandalwood cologne. "Just thinking about the Henderson project," Amelia replied, leaning back against his chest. "The foundation plans need revisions." "Always working," he murmured against her neck, sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. Even when surrounded by New York's elite. The night they met still played vividly in Amelia's memory. A charity gala where she'd been invited to showcase sustainable architectural designs. Victor had approached her display, asking questions that revealed genuine interest rather than polite conversation. Within weeks, their professional admiration had blossomed into something deeper. 14 months later, his grandmother's emerald ring adorned her finger. "Let's escape this weekend," Victor suggested, turning her to face him. "The Maldives. Just us, crystal water, and absolute privacy." Amelia smiled but hesitated. "I should tell you something first." Later that evening, in the quiet of their bedroom, Amelia sat on the edge of their California king, watching Victor's expression shift as she shared the news. 2 pregnancy tests had confirmed it that morning. "Pregnant?" he repeated, his face unreadable. He sat beside her, not touching. "I know it's unexpected," Amelia began, her heart racing. "But I thought—" "The Lumina merger finalizes next month," Victor interrupted, his voice suddenly clinical. 10 years of work, Amelia. A $1 billion deal that changes everything for Nexus. Confusion crept across Amelia's face. "What does that have to do with our baby?" Victor stood pacing to the window. "The conservative investors I've been courting." A pregnancy scandal. An unmarried CEO with a pregnant fiancée. His words fell like ice. The timing couldn't be worse. Scandal? Amelia echoed. Victor, we're engaged. We're in love. How is this a scandal? You need to terminate it, he said, the words striking Amelia like physical blows. We can revisit the idea of children after the merger, when the timing is appropriate. Amelia felt the room tilt. The idea of children? This isn't an idea, Victor. This is our child. Be reasonable, he countered, his voice hardening. Everything I've built, everything we could have, you'd risk it all for unplanned sentiment? Amelia stood slowly, her arms instinctively crossing over her stomach. I thought I knew you. You do know me, Victor replied. I'm the man who makes necessary decisions, who builds empires, who doesn't let emotion cloud judgment. That night, Amelia packed a single suitcase while Victor worked in his home office, the door firmly closed. She left her engagement ring on the nightstand alongside a note with just 3 words. Some things matter. As her taxi pulled away from the luxury high-rise, Amelia didn't look back at the golden tower where she'd believed her future lay. Her hand rested on her stomach, tears streaming silently down her face. The pregnancy wasn't just unexpected, it was illuminating. In Victor's ultimatum, she had seen the true shape of his love, conditional, calculating, and ultimately hollow. The night embraced her, a woman with nothing but the life growing inside her and the certainty that somewhere ahead lay a different kind of strength than the one she was leaving behind. 3 months after leaving Manhattan, Amelia found herself in the coastal town of Port Haven, her pregnancy now visibly changing her silhouette. The salt-scented air filled her lungs as she pushed open the door to Chapters and Chai, the faded blue bookstore that had become her sanctuary. There you are, dear, called Eleanor Whitman, the silver-haired owner, from behind a stack of leather-bound classics. Your usual table is waiting. At 72, Eleanor had the wisdom of decades and the energy of someone half her age. When she'd found Amelia crying in the travel section weeks earlier, she'd simply offered tea and conversation without judgment. The doctor confirmed it today, Amelia said, settling into the worn armchair by the window. Twins? Eleanor's eyes widened. My goodness. 2 little ones. 2 little ones, Amelia repeated, her voice a mixture of wonder and terror. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the ultrasound image. The modest apartment above Eleanor's shop had become Amelia's home. Her savings wouldn't last forever, but she'd begun freelancing, designing small residential projects for locals who appreciated her innovative, sustainable approach. Later that evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Amelia spread her designs across her small kitchen table. A concept for an eco-friendly community center had been forming in her mind, something that would bring together her architectural expertise with her growing passion for creating spaces that served real people, not just corporate ambitions. You've got that look again, Eleanor observed, bringing in a plate of ginger cookies. What look? The one that says you're building something in that brilliant mind of yours. Amelia smiled, rubbing her growing belly. I'm thinking about starting my own firm, focusing on sustainable community projects. Now that, Eleanor said, tapping the sketch, sounds like a foundation worth building. By her 7th month, Amelia had secured her business license for Terra Designs, rented a tiny office space, and landed her first significant client, a local family wanting an energy-efficient home that honored their oceanfront property. The twins arrived on a crisp autumn morning, Lily and Luna identical in their perfection. Amelia gazed at their tiny faces, overwhelmed by a love so fierce it made her past life seem like a distant dream. They have your eyes, Eleanor whispered in the hospital room, gently stroking Luna's cheek. And their father's stubborn chin, Amelia replied, her voice free of bitterness. She had chosen to remember the good in Victor, if only so she could someday tell her daughters something positive about their heritage. The following months blurred into a rhythm of midnight feedings, client meetings often conducted with a sleeping infant strapped to her chest, and designs created during precious nap time hours. Port Haven embraced the single mother and her vision. Terra Designs grew steadily, developing a reputation for structures that seemed to emerge organically from their surroundings. On the twins' first birthday, Amelia stood on the balcony of her new home, a modest but beautiful space she'd designed herself, overlooking the water. Eleanor joined her, champagne glasses filled with sparkling cider. To foundations, the older woman offered. Amelia clinked her glass. To foundations. Inside, her daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the empire their father commanded or the different kind of empire their mother was building, one measured not in billions, but in balanced books, sustainable designs, and a growing portfolio that had begun attracting attention beyond their small coastal town. He never tried to find me, Amelia confessed quietly. Not once. Eleanor squeezed her hand. Some men build towers so tall they can't see what matters at ground level. Amelia nodded, watching the moonlight dance across the waves. In her mind, Victor's golden tower seemed less impressive now, standing alone against the sky with nothing to anchor it to earth.